The arrogant bank teller humiliates her in front of silent onlookers, but the girl's calm strength hints at something bigger. The final line flips the whole energy, leaving a cliffhanger about who she really is. You people always try to pull something, don't you? The words sliced through the hushed marble lobby of Ravenhill Premier Bank. The teller's voice, syrupy and sharp, carried past the line of polished shoes and cold stares. Behind the counter's glossy glass, his smile was a tight, smug line. Rain tapped softly at the floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside, the air was stiff with a stale kind of wealth. Sunlight glared off brass fixtures and clean, white walls. The waiting customers, men in tailored suits, women with sleek hair and quiet pearls, shifted uneasily. But no one said a word. At the center of it all stood Amara, barely 15. She looked even younger in her school uniform, a navy blazer too big for her shoulders, her braids tied with a neat blue ribbon. In her hand, she clutched an envelope so tightly that the edges had curled. "Excuse me?" Amara's voice was soft, almost swallowed by the marble floor. The teller, Mark, according to the tiny gold plate pinned to his chest, leaned closer. His cologne mingled with the antiseptic scent of the polished counters. "You heard me." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, loud enough for the next customer to hear. "You kids think you can just walk in here with someone else's checks? Who did you steal these from?" A low gasp rippled down the line, then silence. Amara's eyes flicked to the rows of waiting faces, each one quickly pretending they hadn't heard. She set the envelope on the counter. Her hand trembled, but her shoulders stayed square. Mark looked at the envelope like it was crawling with insects. "Step aside. I have real clients waiting," he snapped. He gestured to the security guard posted by the glass doors, a man who suddenly found a very interesting spot on his shoe. Amara didn't move. Her gaze dropped to the small, hateful smirk on Mark's lips. Her breathing slowed. Mark leaned back, clearly entertained by the hush that had fallen over the room. He liked the audience. He liked the power. With a flourish, he snatched the envelope and tore it open, a symbolic ripping of dignity. Checks fluttered out, scattering like trapped birds onto the spotless floor. He let out a mocking laugh as they landed by her feet. "Oops," he said, with false sweetness. "You can pick those up now. Maybe try the corner check cashing place next time, sweetheart." Silence swallowed the bank. No one moved to help. Amara bent slowly, gathering the checks with careful fingers. Each piece of paper whispered back to her reminders of trust, of responsibility, of promises she knew she could keep. She stood. Her eyes met Mark's, calm, clear, not a hint of the tears he wanted. She slipped the envelope back together, hands steady now. Then she leaned in, just close enough that he alone could hear the steel behind her quiet words. "You should look up whose name is on those checks before you talk down to me." Double quotes. Mark blinked. The customers leaned forward, just slightly, drawn to the sudden shift, the invisible spark of something bigger than marble and brass. Amara turned, envelope tucked firmly under her arm. She walked to the nearest leather chair and sat down, her eyes on the rain sliding down the window. She didn't flinch when the door swung open behind her. And when it did, every neck turned. Every shoe shuffled. The air seemed to hold its breath. A single pair of red-bottomed heels clicked against the marble, slow and measured, carrying a presence the lobby hadn't seen in years. And Mark? Mark's smirk faltered for the first time. The woman's heels tapped out an unhurried rhythm as she crossed the gleaming floor. Each step echoed off the stone walls and brushed the hush into something tense, electric. Conversations that had dared to spark died under her passing shadow. She wore a sharply tailored charcoal suit, the kind that made her stand out in any room. Her natural hair was sculpted into a crown that framed her face like a statement. This space, These walls were hers to command. In her left hand, a slim leather briefcase. On her wrist, a watch worth more than most of the lobby's cars combined. Mark straightened up, hastily brushing invisible lint from his Jeep Blazer. He caught her eyes and tried to anchor his smirk back into place, but the edges quivered. This woman, he didn't recognize her, yet she radiated the weight of someone who was never asked to wait. Amara didn't stand. She watched from her seat by the window, her fingers tracing the envelope's edge. Her reflection in the glass doubled her calm. Two Amaras, both silent, both patient. The woman stopped at the teller window. She didn't speak right away. She let the silence do the speaking for her. Mark cleared his throat, fake confidence crawling back onto his tongue. "Good afternoon, ma'am. How can I help you today?" He gestured at the scattered checks Amara had gathered back into their envelope. His grin returned, smug, defensive. He hoped she hadn't noticed. He hoped she was just another customer. Easy, unaware. The woman's gaze flicked to the checks, then to the child by the window. Her nostrils flared almost imperceptibly. But when she looked back at Mark, her smile was gentle, sharpness hidden behind polished courtesy. "Are you the branch manager?" she asked. Mark barked a laugh he quickly disguised as a cough. "Oh no, ma'am. But I'm more than capable of assisting. Call him." Her voice was smooth, unbothered. She turned slightly, enough to see the other customers peering over their phones, pretending not to watch. Mark's lips parted. He scrambled for an angle. "Is there something I can help you with directly?" "I'd hate to." She cut him off with a single lifted brow. He froze like a dog who just heard the leash snap. "I won't repeat myself," she said, her tone still polite, almost warm. It made the chill under Mark's collar even worse. He fumbled for the intercom. Behind him, the security guard had found the courage to look up again, curiosity dancing behind forced professionalism. Amara rested her chin on her hand, her expression blank. To anyone else she might have seemed detached, but inside her chest her heart drummed out. Steady beat of quiet triumph. This was how her mother moved. Not with anger, not with loud threats, but with gravity that pulled every pair of eyes exactly where she wanted them. The branch manager appeared within moments, summoned by Mark's shaky voice over the intercom. A round man with thinning hair and an expensive tie that couldn't quite hide the sweat on his neck. He put on a broad grin as soon as he spotted the woman. "Mrs. Aniqua, what a surprise. We didn't know you'd be stopping by this branch today." She held up one manicured hand. He silenced himself mid-flatter. She leaned closer to the counter, her voice still velvet smooth. "I see you're running a tight ship here, Mr. Reynolds." The manager's eyes darted to Mark, then to Amara, then to the checks that now sat primly on the counter again. His brain whirred behind his forced smile, calculating the damage. Mark felt the heat creep up his neck. "I'm not sure what you mean, ma'am. I was only—" She didn't even glance at him. "Did you accuse my daughter of theft?" The word daughter struck like a glass shattering on marble. The other customers stopped pretending altogether. Necks craned. Fingers froze mid-scroll. Amara lifted her head just slightly, her eyes locking with her mother's. The tiniest curve of her lips was all the chinness was all the chin with her mother's. The tiniest curve of her lips with her mother's, with the vefezy curve of her lips was all the encouragement she needed. Mark's voice stammered. I didn't, she didn't." Mrs. Aniqua turned to the manager. "In my office. Now, no raised voice, no threats. Just that same patient, heavy calm that made Mark's knees soft and the manager's grin tremble." She glanced once at Amara, her eyes softening. Then she turned on her heel, her red solace flashing like a warning flare across the polished floor. Amara stood, envelope in hand, and followed. Behind them, the lobby's hush turned into a low murmur, the start of gossip, of uncomfortable Truths whispered just loud enough to spread, and Mark was left alone behind the counter, the marble suddenly so cold beneath his sweating palms. The heavy door of the branch manager's office shut with a soft click that seemed to echo louder than Mark's cruel words ever had. The blinds rattled as Mrs. Anaqui strode past them, her heels digging into the plush carpet like stakes in the ground. Amara slipped in behind her mother, folding herself into a seat against the wall. She placed the envelope neatly on her lap. It felt heavier now, not with checks, but with the silence that settled whenever her mother spoke in rooms like this. Mr. Reynolds, the branch manager, cleared his throat and fussed with the papers on his desk. His eyes darted from the framed certificates behind him to Mrs. Aniqui's steady gaze. He tried to hide the way his hands trembled as he gestured at the leather chair opposite him. "Please, Mrs. Anaqui, have a seat. Can I offer you some water? Coffee?" She ignored the chair, standing tall in the middle of the room. Her eyes flicked to Amara for a moment, a silent check-in, before returning to the manager like a hawk circling prey. "Tell me, Mr. Reynolds," she began, her voice calm enough to make his neck blotch red, "how long has Mark been working for this branch?" The manager forced a polite laugh that died halfway out. Mark has been with us for about 3 years now. He's generally a solid employee. If there's been some misunderstanding, I assure you, misunderstanding?" Her tone clipped the end of his sentence like garden shears. She didn't raise her voice, yet it landed on him like a slap. She stepped closer, planting her briefcase on his desk with a soft thud. A teenage girl walks into deposit checks, following every policy you promote on your posters out there, and your employee humiliates her in public. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a culture. Amara watched her mother's back. The gray suit, the crisp white blouse at the collar, a uniform of quiet authority that no one could crumple. No matter how many whispers followed her into boardrooms. Mr. Reynolds tugged at his collar. "I assure you, we do not tolerate discrimination here. I'll speak to Mark," and Mrs. Anaqui leaned in, voice low and steady. "You will not speak to Mark. You will document this. You will submit a formal incident report. And you will make it available for my legal team," Reynolds sputtered. "Legal team? Ma'am, surely we can resolve this internally." She raised a single finger, silencing him. Amara could see how her mother's eyes softened when they shifted her way, but when they returned to Reynolds, they turned to steel again. "For years, your branch has funneled minority clients to separate lines, separate counters. New accounts only signs appear mysteriously when certain people walk in. Your overdraft penalties hit certain neighborhoods harder than others. I have the numbers. Mr. Reynolds." The manager's mouth opened and closed, fish-like, his practiced charm slipping away in beads of sweat at his temple. Mrs. Anaqui flipped open her briefcase. She slid a slim folder across the polished desk. He hesitated, then cracked it open. Line after line of data stared back. Numbers, percentages, names, evidence. Amara didn't look away when Reynolds' eyes flicked to her again. For a second, she saw the truth behind his forced grin. He was afraid, not just of losing a client, but of losing the image he'd built brick by brick over decades. An image that didn't include people like her. Mrs. Aniqui's voice softened, but the edge remained. "You will handle this by tomorrow. Mark's employment status is your choice, but know this. If your solution insults my intelligence, this branch will see headlines before dawn." She leaned back, giving him room to breathe. "And you will apologize to my daughter, here, now." Reynolds flinched like she'd thrown cold water in his face. He stood shakily, his shoes squeaking on the plush carpet as he shuffled around the desk toward Amara. For a heartbeat, Amara saw the boyish panic in his eyes, a grown man, undone by the quiet power of a woman he couldn't dismiss. He cleared. His throat. Miss, I am truly sorry for the behavior you experienced today. It was unacceptable and does not reflect our. Amara held his gaze. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. She let him drown in the awkward silence he had earned. Finally, Mrs. Annequi spoke for both of them. You're dismissed, Mr. Reynolds. I'll wait for your report by morning. He shuffled out, clutching the folder like a lifeline. The door clicked shut behind him. In the hush that followed, Amara's mother turned at last. She crouched in front of her daughter, smoothing a stray braid behind her ear. For the first time since she'd walked in, her mask slipped, just enough for Amara to see the weariness in her eyes. You okay, baby? Amara nodded, her voice steady. I am now. And outside that heavy door, the walls of the marble lobby. Whispered rumors they would never forget. Word spreads faster than the cold air from the bank's vents. It weaves between marble pillars and leather chairs, slipping into purses, whispered behind polite coughs, texted under the cover of lowered eyes. By the time Amara and her mother step back into the lobby, the hush has shape. Rumor, half-truth, hope for gossip. The same customers who pretended not to see Amara's humiliation now lean in, desperate to catch a glimpse of the storm they pretended not to notice. Mark stands frozen behind his counter. He tries to fix his hair, straighten his tie, but the fluster shows through like sweat on silk. He forces a smile when Mrs. Annequi's eyes meet his, but his mouth twitches at the corners. It's the smile of a man whose mask is slipping thread by thread. Amara holds the envelope tighter as she walks at her mother's side. She catches the eyes that dart away too late. The man in the tailored suit who pretends to check his watch. The woman with the pearl earrings who fakes a text that's never sent. They don't speak, but their silence is full of apology that never finds a voice. Mrs. Annequi pauses in the middle of the lobby. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. She turns to Amara, loud enough for every ear tuned to their heartbeat. Do you want to finish your deposit here? She asks. Mark shifts behind the counter, pretending to busy himself with the till. He looks at Amara, then away. He knows what her answer means. Amara studies the marble floor, the cold brass fixtures, the way Mark's eyes flick nervously to the door every few seconds. She lifts her chin and locks eyes with her mother. No, she says. Her voice is clear, calm. I'll do it tomorrow. Somewhere else. A hush sharper than the one before. Even the guard near the door straightens as if he might applaud. Mrs. Annequi nods once. She turns to Mark, holding him there with nothing but her gaze. Remember her face, she says. Remember that next time you choose who deserves your respect. Mark's mouth opens, closes. He glances at the people listening, the people who will carry this moment back into whispered lunch breaks and side hall conversations. He tries to say something, anything, but the words tangle with the fear caught in his throat. Mrs. Annequi doesn't wait for an answer. She leads Amara through the hush, the soft click of her heels the only sound that dares to follow them. They pass the guard, who dips his head but doesn't meet their eyes. Outside, the city is the same as it was an hour ago. Gray drizzle, cars slicing through puddles, people hunched under umbrellas. But for Amara, something has shifted. The air feels clearer somehow, sharp enough to cut through marble walls. At the curb, a sleek black town car waits. The driver jumps out, holding the door open with a quiet "ma'am." He doesn't stare at Amara like she's too small to matter. He doesn't look away when her mother hands him the envelope. Inside the warm cocoon of leather seats, Amara watches the bank fade behind the rain-fogged glass. The giant brass logo gleams faintly, distorted by droplets that snake down the window. Her mother sits beside her, her briefcase on her lap, phone buzzing with incoming calls. Her fingers hover over the screen but never touch it yet. She turns instead, her eyes softer than they've been all day. You did well in there, she says. Amara shrugs. You did everything. A small smile flickers at the corner of her mother's mouth. No, you did. You stood still. You didn't fold. Amara looks down at her hands. The envelope is gone now, in the driver's possession. But the weight of it, the meaning, lingers in her palms. Do they hate us? She asks softly. Mrs. Aniqua doesn't answer right away. She lifts her hand, brushing a thumb across Amara's temple, pushing back the braid that always slips free when she's nervous. They fear us, she says finally. They hate what they fear, and they fear what they can't control. The car hums through a green light. Behind them, the bank is just another building swallowed by the city's teeth. Amara turns to the window, the city reflected in her eyes. For the first time, she doesn't feel like the smallest person in the room. She feels like the spark that might burn the room down if she wanted. Beside her, her mother's phone vibrates again. Another call, another fire to light or put out. But for this one moment, the world outside the glass can wait. Inside the car, it's just them. And they're not finished yet. The glass tower of Aniqua Holdings rose above the city like a challenge, a sleek blade of mirrored windows that caught the late afternoon sun and threw it back at every gray building around it. Amara always felt small walking under its arching entrance, but today, the revolving doors seemed to welcome her with a hush that wasn't cold, just expectant. Inside, the lobby was bright and humming. Men and women in smart suits paused mid-stride when they saw Mrs. Aniqua and her daughter step in. A secretary at the reception desk lowered her voice, whispering urgently into a headset, eyes wide when they flicked to Amara. They knew, or they thought they knew. Rumors had traveled faster than the rain that now lashed the city streets outside. Amara caught snatches as she and her mother crossed the polished marble. The bank branch humiliated her own child. Legal teams already drafting. Mark's done for. It was like watching pebbles drop in water, ripples growing larger with every whisper. Amara clutched her backpacks. Strapped with one hand, the fabric warm under her palm. She felt eyes flick over her uniform, her braids, her mother's calm stride, and she didn't shrink. Not this time. The elevator doors glided open with a soft chime. Inside the mirrored box, Amara caught her reflection, small shoulders. Meat blazer, chin a little higher than yesterday. Her mother leaned against the panel, thumbs tapping out a quick message. The briefcase balanced by her side like a trusted blade. She glanced at Amara's reflection and caught her eye. You know this doesn't end with Mark, right? Amara swallowed. I know. The elevator hummed past the 35th floor, climbing higher than most people ever got to see. Past the lower offices, past HR, past the places where whispers stopped and signatures started. Good, her mother said. She slipped her phone into her pocket, her posture straightening as the numbers ticked up. Because the only thing worse than open disrespect is silent rot, and that bank? It's rotting from the inside. The elevator eased to a stop on the top floor. The doors opened to a world that felt like it belonged to someone else. Thick carpets, framed art, the faint scent of fresh flowers and old wood. Amara stepped out behind her mother into an office that was part boardroom, part battleground. A young woman in a crisp suit looked up from her desk just outside the glass-walled executive office. She gave Amara a warm smile, but her eyes darted nervously to Mrs. Aniqua. Mrs. Aniqua, I have the full incident file ready for review. HR's pulling Mark's personnel history now. And she lowered her voice, glancing at Amara. Do you want me to forward the press inquiries to legal? Or, Mrs. Aniqua waved a hand, cutting her off with a soft firmness that felt colder than any shout. Draft the statement. Not yet for release, just ready. And tell legal they'll have my notes by midnight. The assistant nodded, eyes wide, already tapping at her keyboard as if each word were a fuse waiting to be lit. Inside the glass office, Amara perched on the velvet chair across from her mother's massive oak desk. The city stretched below them, blurred by rain. Tiny lights winked on as dusk crawled in, a city too busy to look up at the storm it had just invited. Her mother pulled off her blazer, draping it neatly on the back of her chair. For a moment, she looked more tired than Amara had ever seen, shoulders heavy, neck stiff. But when she sat down, the weight seemed to melt away, replaced by the same poised steel that had frozen a bank lobby just hours ago. Amara let her fingers trail over the smooth armrest, the distant hum of the city vibrating under the glass walls. "Are you going to fire him yourself?" she asked. Her mother shook her head, a humorless smile tugging at her lips. "He doesn't work for me, baby." "But he's about to wish he did." She turned her laptop toward Amara, a half-written email glowing on the screen, subject line: "Partnership suspension, Ravenhill Premier Branch." A single sentence below it: "Effective immediately." Amara's eyebrows lifted. "You're pulling the company's accounts?" Mrs. Annequi leaned back, folding her hands over her stomach. "There. Board will notice faster than HR ever will. A few million moving away overnight, that's a language they all speak." Outside the glass walls, staff moved like currents in a river, purposeful, fast, pretending not to glance at the girl in the chair who'd made the world tilt. Few degrees in an hour, Amara's mother watched her watch them. Her eyes softened again, the steel warm for now. "You did more than stand up for yourself today," she said. "You reminded them we're not small." Amara thought of the cold marble floor, the envelope in her hands, Mark's smirk splitting under the weight of the truth. She looked her mother dead in the eye and said, steady as a heartbeat, then, "Let's remind them again." Mark's morning started with the same routine: stale coffee from the break room, stiff collar biting his neck, the hush of footsteps over marble floors. But something about the air felt heavier, like the building itself was waiting for him to slip. The lobby looked the same. The polished brass logo still gleamed. But behind the teller counter, Mark felt the stares. His coworkers pretended not to look, yet every conversation halted the moment he walked by. He felt the shift, the invisible line between harmless gossip and a target on his back. He'd seen the headlines that morning, half-formed whispers on local blogs. Black teen humiliated at bank. Local CEO demands answers. His phone buzzed with texts he didn't answer. Old college buddies asking if it was that branch, if it was that guy. His manager, Mr. Reynolds, stood by the office door like a stone gargoyle waiting to pounce. His tie hung slightly askew, his forehead damp with stress. He didn't smile when he called Mark into the back office. Inside, the blinds were half closed, slicing the morning light into sharp stripes across the cheap wooden desk. Mark sank into the guest chair, trying to keep his knee from bouncing. The manager didn't sit. He hovered by the window, phone in hand, voice hushed but sharp. "I understand, sir. We're handling it internally, but the client has pulled. Major assets. Yes, I know." He paused, glancing at Mark like he was staring at a stain he couldn't scrub out. "We're preparing a statement. I'll call you back." He ended the call with a sigh that carried a year's worth of frustration. He turned, eyes cold. "You know what this is about, Mark?" Mark's tongue darted across dry lips. "Look, Mr. Reynolds, I was just doing my job." She looked suspicious. She was. "Stop." The word snapped like a trap closing. Reynolds leaned forward, knuckles pressed to the desk. "You embarrassed this branch in front of our largest corporate partner. You humiliated a child. And you did it in front of half the city. Do you realize how fast news travels when someone like her decides to speak?" Mark opened his mouth to protest, but the manager didn't give him the chance. "They're freezing accounts, Mark. Do you know what that means for us?" Do you know how many other clients start asking questions when she starts talking? Outside the glass, Mark could see the lobby, the same hush as always, but now every movement felt like a judgment. A coworker brushed past, eyes flicking away so fast they left a burn on Mark's skin. Reynolds straightened, pulling a single sheet of paper from a folder. He slid it across the desk, a form Mark knew too well. Internal review. Disciplinary. Action. The first nail. You'll sign this. And you'll hope she doesn't decide that's not enough. Mark's fingers twitched over the paper. He pictured the lobby. The envelope. The girl's calm eyes, her mother's measured voice. The memory left a bitter taste in his mouth. Not guilt, just the shame of being exposed. Reynolds didn't sit. He just stood there, waiting, like a judge whose verdict was already decided. Across town, Amara sat in the corner of her mother's office, a notebook on her knees. She'd been pretending to do homework, but the quiet hum of strategy calls and softly slammed doors pulled her attention like gravity through the glass. She could see her mother in the conference room, surrounded by senior staff. They spoke. In low, tense voices, slides projected on a wall, charts and statements dissected like prey. Amara couldn't hear the words, but she didn't need to. She saw the way people leaned in when her mother spoke, how they took notes at triple speed, how the quiet dignity she'd wielded at the bank now cut through excuses like a blade. She flipped a page in her notebook, her pencil tapping at the margin, the word apology scribbled in her neat, small handwriting. Then underlined once. Twice. She thought of Mark's smirk when he'd ripped open the envelope. The scattered checks on the floor. The way people had looked away, then leaned. In the moment her mother stepped through the door, Amara wondered if they'd have cared at all if her mother hadn't come. If she'd just bent down, gathered the checks, walked out alone. If she'd stayed quiet, she stared out the rain-blurred window at the city below, the same streets, the same polished buildings that liked to pretend stories like hers didn't happen here, but the marble cracked when you pressed hard enough. She could see it now, the hairline fractures, running under polite smiles and polished brass. Her mother's conference room door swung open. Mrs. Anique stepped out, her eyes landing on Amara first before scanning the hallway. "Come on," she said softly. "You need to see this." Amara stood, her pencil rolling off her lap and onto the carpet unnoticed. She followed her mother down the hall, not to hide behind her, not to watch from the corner, but to stand beside her when the next door opened. Because sometimes you didn't wait for an apology. Sometimes you walked in and demanded the world write it down. Word for word. The conference room smelled faintly of leather and stale cologne, the kind that clung to expensive suits and old money. The walls were paneled in dark wood, the floor a thick, gray carpet that muffled footsteps but couldn't hush the tension that buzzed under every breath. Amara sat beside her mother at the long table, her small hands folded neatly on the polished surface. Across from them sat three men in matching dark suits, silver cufflinks glinting under the recessed lights. Their nameplates gleamed, but their eyes betrayed the crackle of panic behind polite smiles. Mrs. Anique didn't smile back. She didn't lean back, didn't cross her arms. She sat perfectly still, her presence filling every inch of the space they thought they controlled. One of the men cleared his throat, forcing an oily grin. "Mrs. Anique, let me start by saying how deeply we regret the unfortunate incident that occurred at our Ravenhill branch." He paused, as if waiting for her to grant him permission to continue. "She the idea in single quotes. The man's eyes flicked nervously. "To Amara. And to your daughter, of course. We take these allegations very seriously. Mark's behavior was completely allegations?" Mrs. Anique's voice slipped into the silence like a knife under silk. Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Are you suggesting my daughter fabricated what happened?" The second man, older, with a gold tie pin and thinning hair, jumped in before the first could sputter and answer. No, of course not. What he meant was that the incident is under investigation. We've already suspended the employee. There will be disciplinary, she repeated, tasting the word like something sour. You think this is about one rude teller? The third man, who hadn't spoken yet, leaned forward with a lawyer's precision. Mrs. Anaqua, if you could allow us to... She didn't allow him anything. She flipped open a slim folder and spread out the checks from the envelope, one by one, across the dark wood. Her hand moved slowly, deliberately, the scratch of paper against the table loud in the hush. Amara watched their eyes drop to the checks, the crisp signatures, the company logos, the big numbers. She felt the shift again, the invisible. Gravity her mother carried like a hidden crown. These checks, Mrs. Anaqua said, tapping one with her manicured nail, represent investments, partnerships, payroll, small businesses, families, entire blocks that trust my name when they sign on this line. She tapped the name again, Anaqua Jings, printed in clean black ink. You didn't humiliate my daughter, she said, her voice so calm it hurt. You humiliated them. You humiliated every family who banks with you because they think you see them as more than a risk. The older man adjusted his tie pin, swallowing hard. Mrs. Anaqua, understand. We are prepared to issue a public apology and... Public apology? She let out a soft, humorless laugh. A headline. A statement. And tomorrow, Mark's cousin or Mark's friend or another Mark stands at another counter and does the same thing to another child. Amara felt heat bloom in her chest. She watched her mother stand now, gathering the checks with careful fingers. I'm not here for an apology, Mrs. Anaqua said. I'm here to remind you what my name means when you print it on your quarterly reports. She leaned forward, just enough that the men instinctively leaned back. You think you're too big to notice us when we stand alone, she said, voice steady as a heartbeat. So I won't stand alone. By the time my team is finished, every partner we have will know exactly how you treat the people they send to your counters. She turned to Amara then, the edge softening just a little. Would you like to say? Anything, baby? Amara hesitated. The men watched her, a teenage girl in a school blazer, a child they dismiss the moment they read minor in the file. She met their eyes, one by one. Her voice didn't waver. Next time you see a girl like me at your window, she said, remember whose name is on the check. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was sharp. Like glass cracking under weight. Mrs. Anaqua gathered the folder, sliding the checks back inside. She didn't look back as she headed for the door. Amara rose and followed, her sneakers silent on the thick carpet. At the threshold, Amara turned one last time. The men stared after them, 3 suits in a dark paneled room, blinking under lights that suddenly felt too bright. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just closed the door behind them, soft as a promise. By the next morning, the city hummed with the story. It drifted down main streets and the hush of cafes, jumped between barbershops and beauty salons, echoed through churches and school hallways. Everyone knew or wanted to know what had happened at Ravenhill Premier. Amara sat by her bedroom window, knees pulled to her chest, phone buzzing beside her. Headlines blurred past her eyes. Local CEO withdraws millions after teen daughter. Faces racism at bank. Community leaders rally behind young girl's stand. Where do banks draw the line? Each notification was a tiny spark, setting parts of her life alight she hadn't known were flammable. Downstairs, she heard her mother's calm voice on a call, measured, unwavering, each word carved from stone. Amara pictured her mother's hands on the kitchen counter, one holding her phone, the other steadying the weight of the whole thing like it was just another business deal. She thumbed through comments. Under an article, "Brave girl, brave mother. Nothing changes until someone makes noise." How many kids don't have a mother like that? Amara closed the app, pressing the phone to her knee. Outside her window, rain dripped from the roof in slow, steady beats. She thought of the envelope, the checks, the hush of the marble floor when Mark's voice cut her down like she was nothing. She wasn't nothing now. She was everywhere. And the thought sat heavy on her chest, heavier than the stairs in the bank lobby, heavier than the envelope that started it all. Her mother's voice floated up the stairs, a soft, "Come down, baby." Amara patted down barefoot, the wooden steps cool under her feet. The kitchen smelled like fresh toast and the faint citrus of the disinfectant her mother insisted on using. Mrs. Iniqui sat at the breakfast table, her phone face down beside a mug of untouched tea. On the table lay a stack of printed articles, clipped neatly together with a binder clip. Amara glanced at the bold headlines, then at her mother's tired smile. "You made the news," Mrs. Aniqua said gently. Amara slipped into the chair opposite her, fingers brushing the edges of the papers. "It doesn't feel like me." "Her?" Mother's eyes softened. "It feels bigger, doesn't it?" Amara nodded. She didn't trust herself to say more. Mrs. Aniqua reached across the table, her palm warm and steady over Amara's cold fingers. "Do you know why they're listening?" she asked. Amara's voice was barely there. "Because you're important." Her mother's laugh was soft and sad all at once. "No, baby. Because you didn't back down. Because you didn't make yourself small when he tried to make you invisible." She squeezed Amara's hand. "Power listens to noise, but it respects stillness more. You were still. You were clear. And that makes them afraid." Amara let her gaze drift to the window. Outside, the street glistened under the weak morning sun. Neighbors walked past in coats and scarves, some pausing to glance at their house, not in pity, but in quiet recognition. The world was seeing her face for the first time, not as a little girl with braids and an envelope too heavy for her hands, but as the spark that made the cracks in the marble visible. Her mother's phone buzzed again. Another message, another request for comment. Mrs. Aniqua ignored it, brushing a curl of hair from Amara's forehead. "This isn't just about you," she said, "or me. It's about every girl who stands in line and gets told she doesn't belong. Every mother who can't walk in behind her to scare them straight." Amara's eyes flicked back to her mother. What if they forget tomorrow? Her mother's expression turned fierce, the same unbothered steel that had frozen the bank lobby in place. "Then we remind them again. And again. And again." Amara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She picked up one of the articles, tracing her finger over the bold letters of her name. It felt too big. It felt too heavy. But under her mother's hand, it felt like something she could carry. Down the street, the bank's brass logo still shone behind the rain-fogged windows. The same marble, the same hush. But today, someone somewhere was standing a little taller at the counter. Maybe they'd look the teller in the eye. Maybe they'd remember a girl in a blue blazer who didn't bend. And maybe, just maybe, the marble would crack a little more. The school hallway felt smaller than usual, its beige lockers and fluorescent lights pressing in like curious eyes. Amara stepped through the front doors and felt every conversation pause for a split second before picking up again. Twice as hushed, twice as sharp. Her shoes squeaked on the polished floor. She kept her head up. She passed the bulletin board, where flyers fluttered under layers of tape, soccer tryouts, debate club, a faded anti-bullying poster no one looked at until they needed it. They needed it now, apparently. She caught snippets as she passed. That's her, right? Her mom's on the news. I'd never let that happen to me. She wanted to laugh at that last one. As if letting it happen had ever been her choice. At her locker, two girls she barely knew pretended to rummage through their bags but didn't move away. One of them gave Amara a stiff smile. All lips, no teeth. "Hey, we saw the video. You're like, really? Brave." Amara forced a polite nod, twisting the dial on her lock. "Thanks." They lingered just long enough to make it awkward, then slipped away. Their whispered, "Oh dash my dash god dash that dash was dash so dash awkward," drifting back down the hall like a stale perfume. Inside her locker, her textbooks were stacked in neat rows, her name written in black Sharpie on the inside covers. Proof she belonged here, even when people looked at her like she'd grown wings overnight. She felt the eyes again in homeroom. Some kids smiled, nodding like they wanted to say good job. Others stared too long, as if waiting for her to stand up and deliver a speech. A few just looked away, as though what had happened to her was catching, a virus that might leap onto them. If they got too close, her teacher cleared her throat twice before starting roll call. She stumbled over Amara's name, though she'd never stumbled before. Amara marked the moment in her head, the way power shifted even in small rooms. Some people liked her story when it stayed on screens. They didn't know what to do when it sat 2 desks away, breathing the same stale classroom air. After the bell, she ducked into the bathroom. In the mirror, her reflection stared back. Same uniform, same braids, same too big backpack. Nothing heroic. Nothing brave. Just a kid who'd handed a teller an envelope and got told she wasn't enough. The door creaked open behind her. She tensed, half expecting another awkward good job. But it was Zoe, her best friend since 3rd grade, slipping inside, backpack sliding off her shoulder with a thud. "Hey." Zoe's voice was soft but steady, like it always was when the world turned loud. "You okay?" Amara let out a shaky laugh. "I'm so tired of people asking me that." Zoe leaned against the sink next to her, arms folded. "Then I won't ask." They stood in silence, the hum of old fluorescent lights filling the space between them. Zoe nudged her shoulder. "You know you're not alone, right?" Amara's throat tightened. She nodded once. That was enough. That night, home smelled like garlic and ginger, her mother's version of comfort food when the world outside got too sharp. They ate at the small kitchen table, the overhead light humming, the distant clatter of rain against the window. Her mother's phone lay face down by her elbow, screen black for once. She sipped her tea and watched Amara push noodles around her plate. "You did good today," she said quietly. Amara snorted. "I barely said anything." "That's not what you did," her mother said. She tapped a chopstick against her cup for emphasis. "You showed up. You didn't hide." Amara toyed with a strand of noodle, thoughts drifting back to the hallway whispers, the tight smiles. "I just wish it didn't feel so big." Her mother's eyes softened. "Baby, it was always big. We just pretend it's small so we don't lose sleep." She set down her chopsticks, folding her hands on the table. Silence costs more than noise ever will. That's what people forget. Being quiet lets them think it's okay. And every time we say nothing, we pay for it later. Amara felt the weight of the words settle on her shoulders. Heavy, but not crushing. Heavy, but real. She reached across the table, her small hand wrapping around her mother's. Warmth passed between them, something solid enough to stand on when the world felt slippery. Outside, the streetlight flickered. In houses up and down the block, families sat around other tables, carrying different burdens, different hushes. Some louder than others. Tonight, their silence cost nothing. Because tomorrow they'd be noisy all over again. The community hall smelled like fresh paint and old dreams. Folding chairs lined up in neat rows, a microphone standing crooked at the front. Flyers for free tax help and neighborhood cleanups fluttered on a corkboard by the door. Tonight, Those flyers shared space with copies of a headline, "Local Girl Exposes Bank's Discrimination." Amara's face, grainy and half smiling, was taped beside it. She sat near the front, knees bouncing, palms sweating against the cheap plastic seat. Her mother stood by the makeshift podium, checking her phone one last time before slipping it into her purse. People filed in, a slow river of neighbors. Business owners, church ladies with floral dresses and sharp eyes, teenagers in hoodies, parents with toddlers on hips. Some Amara recognized from the grocery store, the bus stop, the church down the street. All here for the same reason. Her mother stepped up when the room settled into a hush. She didn't need a microphone, though. One crackled by her side. Her voice filled the low ceiling and scuffed walls like a promise. "Thank you for coming. Some of you know what happened to my daughter. Some of you know how quickly it can happen to yours, too." Murmurs rippled through the rows. Heads nodded. A few people shifted, uncomfortable not because they didn't believe her, but because they did. Mrs. Anakui laid it out clear and cold. The bank's response, the frozen accounts, the PR statement that never quite apologized. She spoke of numbers, of lost trust, of the millions they'd moved elsewhere. But it wasn't the money that made people lean in. It was the truth that they'd always suspected but rarely said out loud. Every time they think we won't. "Push back, they get bolder," she said, voice steady as stone. "They count on our silence because it's cheaper for them than our anger." She turned to Amara, who felt every eye swing with her. "But we're not here just for the anger. We're here because this," she gestured at the flyers, the cheap folding chairs, the hush that filled the hall, "only works if we stand together." Amara felt her mother's hand rest on her shoulder. The warmth of it made her spine straighten, even as her heartbeat hammered in her ears. "Do you want to say something, baby?" For a moment, she wanted to sink into the chair and vanish. The Zinvi hush stretched, waiting to swallow her words. But she stood up. She walked to the crooked mic and gripped its stand like an anchor. She saw them all. Now, the old man who always waved at her when she walked home from school, the twins from her bus stop who stared at her wide-eyed, the woman who ran the corner store where she bought chips after class. People who'd watched her grow up and people who'd never looked at her twice until this week. Her voice cracked at first, but she didn't flinch. "I'm not brave," she said. The hush thickened. No one moved. I didn't say anything. "Special," she continued, eyes flicking to her mother. "I just didn't stay quiet. That's all." She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she didn't blink them away. Let them see. Let them know. "It's not just the bank," she said, her voice finding its shape now. "It's everywhere. It's teachers who don't say your name right. It's security guards who follow you in stores. It's people who smile at your mom but look through you." A man in the back nodded, arms crossed tight over his chest. A mother hugged her daughter closer on her knee. "I didn't know I could make them listen," Amara said. "But I did. So if they ever do it to you, to your kids, don't stay quiet. Make them see you." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of breath held and released, of spine straightening in cheap chairs, of quiet. Nods that meant more than any headline. Amara stepped back. Her mother wrapped an arm around her shoulders, squeezing her just once, proud but gentle, like a promise she never needed to say out loud. After the meeting, people lingered. They formed small knots in the corners of the hall, swapping stories they'd never told in public. Someone passed around a sign-up sheet for a neighborhood watch, for a meeting with the local bank manager, for a call to the school board about that teacher who'd always mispronounced that one girl's name. Outside, the night air was cool on Amara's cheeks. The street was quiet, puddles glistening under the flickering streetlight. She watched neighbors hug in the parking lot, cars idling with open doors and leftover words. Her mother stood beside her, keys dangling from her hand, the hum of her phone. Blessedly silent for once. You did that, she said, nodding at the clusters of people who refused to go home just yet. Amara thought of the marble floor, the ripped envelope, the hush that cracked when she didn't fold. She thought of the bank's polished brass logo, gleaming behind rain-blurred glass. Maybe next time, she said softly, they'll remember. Her mother smiled. Maybe they will. Amara slipped her hand into hers as they turned toward the car. The street behind them glowed soft in the night, the marble still standing, but the cracks wide enough now to let the light through.